around 2017, 2018, 2019, my body started failing on me. So I had cardiomyopathy and my heart was kind of really enlarged and baggy. So it was like failing. It was like just not pumping properly, basically. There felt like there was no like light at the end of the tunnel. But then you still have this thing of like, surely I'm going to survive this. Like, I can't die. Like, I'm 19. How can I die? But then I think maybe it's that whole Disney thing. Like, oh, there's always going to be that happy ending. But we all know that there's not always happy endings. And
yeah, I mean, you seem like a good person, but almost like an ironic thing where like you're hoping someone dies so they can like give you their heart, you know?
yeah, that was another head fuck as well.
Well, I want to let everyone know Eliza did not have a smooth journey getting to a heart transplant. She actually had 3 false alarms. So what
Yeah.
was going through your mind when it happened 3 times? That's a lot of.
I was in the ambulance and I had my phone and I was thinking, who do I need to message in case I die? Like, who do I need to tell? It was really surreal. I called it the ambulance box of reflection. But when I went through those double doors, that's when I like this emotion came over me and I was like, oh fuck, like I'm either coming out of this fucking place dead or alive. Yeah, basically. I've got a male heart.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've got a male heart. I'm trying to work out if I'm part of the LGBTQ XYZ because I know there's something male in me. I've chatted to a few people about that. Sorry?
That's what she said.
So yeah, it got to the point where I was, striding and I was expecting my heart to do funny flutters and have some palpitations. And so my body, I wanted to stop. My brain was saying, stop, stop.
Mm-hmm.
But, nothing was happening because I had this new heart. Go hike up a mountain when I probably shouldn't have, but I did. But, that's the whole point. Like, having a transplant, you can be a bit reckless. Of course, you've got to take your medications and put your sunscreen on and do all these things, but the whole point of having a transplant is to live life.
Either like, what do you think? Do you think like you're a new Eliza, or do you think you're just like a continuation with like a commercial break in between?
I mean, I encourage anyone who has received an organ to say thanks to their donor. It's just pretty crazy getting your head around someone else's heart being inside you. And I like to say like it's a borrowed heart, like I'm borrowing it from Tom.
Hello, welcome to my podcast, Two Mics, One Joe Suits. I'm Joe Suits, and I'll be giving a mic to Eliza. Eliza is a heart transplant recipient. She's also a mentor for people who are before a transplant, in the middle of a transplant, and after a transplant. Also a fellow podcaster called Transplant Chats with Eliza. First, I want to say I am not a transplant recipient. I mean, I could use an entirely different body, but the technology is not yet available. Boo. On the positive side, the technology is available to transplant a heart where a person has been declared dead for 5 minutes, called donation after circulatory death. That is exactly what happened to Eliza. If my math is correct, you got a heart transplant surgery late 2018, so that makes you 3 to 4 years since the heart plant surgery. How are you feeling?
Yeah, so I had my transplant in early 2019, so nearly.
Oh, okay.
I don't put my exact years on there because there's a thing in the UK where you're not supposed to put when you had your transplant because of, donor families finding you and
Oh,
not
really?
going through the right call. Yeah, so they're very hot on it here.
Wait, so are you telling me the truth of your transplant, or are you lying to me now of the transplant date?
I say early 2019 because that's still pretty vague.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, feeling great. I'm living my life. First year or so is, pretty, I don't know, you're kind of building back up. You don't really have much muscle. You're building muscle back. You're trying to learn how to live life normally after having your life so small for so long. Mm-hmm. And I hate to say it, but it almost, I'm at the point in life where, or in my transplant life, where I sometimes forget I've had a transplant. And although I'm a transplant mentor and transplant coach, like there's still those times where I just get annoyed of something really trivial. And I'm like, no, Eliza, you can't do that. Like, you've been through shit. You can't do that. But yeah, things are good. Thanks.
I have here your best friend quotes you as a bundle of joy, but you were not always a bundle of joy. In 2017, when your energy started depleting and heart was failing, what was happening to your mind and body?
So it's different for different people who are waiting for transplant, as well as I was waiting for a heart, people are waiting for kidneys, livers. But for me personally, around 2017, 2018, 2019, my body started failing on me. So I had cardiomyopathy, and my heart was kind of really enlarged and baggy, so it was like failing. It was like just not pumping properly, basically. And for me, what really fucked me over was water getting stuck in my body. So when you have heart failure, water starts getting stuck in different areas of your body. So you can get it in your ankles, which a lot of old people get. So I felt like an old person. I also got it in my stomach. So had so much water in my stomach, I couldn't eat properly. So then I was getting really underweight. I was throwing up food. My taste started going. So like bread tasted gone off, milk tasted gone off. Like all I could really eat was Chinese takeaways and ice cream.
Okay.
And then my hearing went. So I couldn't go to a cafe, like anything noisy. Like it literally got to a point a couple of months before transplant where I just had to sit and look at a wall and have the curtains closed and just be in silence, because all my senses basically just got distorted and awful. And I couldn't walk. I could only walk like a meter without getting heart palpitations. So yeah, it was pretty shit. And I do get that a lot of the time, and just talking about it now, I'm like, oh god, that did happen to me. And it feels like almost like that happened to another person, but it's me.
Well, I have here you had a tons of complication and required tons of hospital stays. Let's talk about the time where your doctor said, I can no longer help you. You're going to need a new heart. What was going through your mind?
Yeah, I think despair. It felt like I was in a black tunnel with no light at the end of it, like a train tunnel. And there was no light, and it just felt like there was no kind of positive ending. I saw my doctor. I'd had my doctor since I had become ill at 12. He'd stayed with me till I was 20 when I had my transplant. And he was almost like a bit like a second dad, and a bit godlike, because whenever my heart did something funny, he would always give me a different medication to sort it out. And that went on for like maybe 3 or 4 years, where one medication stopped working. Oh, here's a new one. And that kept on going on till there was a point where it's like, there's nothing else I can give you. You're going to need a transplant. And hearing that from the person that you've trusted and like relied on for so many years as like a teenager and child, to then be like 18, 19, 20, well, 19, 20, and be told like, no, nothing more I can do. It's just a bit of a shock, especially at the age of 20, when you think, you should be taking over the world. Like you should be able to do anything you want. And I was just stuck in bed for most of the day, every day.
So, like, the doctor was trying to prevent you from having a heart transplant surgery all along, and at one point.
Yeah, so I guess it was just like maintaining my heart. As my heart was. So the thing with cardiomyopathy, I had Down's disease, which caused cardiomyopathy. When I was 16, they said that, you could go on till you're 40 and be fine, or you could, only have a couple years and then need a transplant. So I think it was quite a surprise that it was quite quick that I needed a transplant. But yeah, I suppose I'm glad that I had it earlier on, because I think I'd rather had a transplant at age 20 to then be able to build myself up to have even 15 years of good quality life than to feel shit all the way through my 20s and then have a transplant and then like have to kind of build up from whatever I'd had at that point. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad this how it turned out. I think it turned out for the best. But, you know, having cardiomyopathy and waiting for a transplant is never great when you're a teenager.
We're going to talk about, not now, but we're going to talk about your trip to Scotland a little bit later, probably for the
Yeah.
finale.
You have been doing your research.
Yeah, of course, of course. So when you were told the news that the doctor said that you needed a new, yeah, so like when the doctor told you that you need a heart transplant, like
Yeah.
what next step did you take? Like, did you think you were going to survive that?
I mean, like I said, I was in a really dark place. I think I was probably quite depressed. There felt like there was no like light at the end of the tunnel. But then you still have this thing of like, surely I'm going to survive this. Like, I can't die. Like, I'm 19. How can I die? But then I think maybe it's that whole Disney thing. Like, oh, there's always going to be that happy ending. But we all know that there's not always happy endings. And I know people of a similar age who had a transplant and then died, or people who were waiting for a transplant that were my age and died whilst waiting. And I think I just didn't think about it. I think I was too ill to really think about that far ahead. But even just the idea of having a transplant was really fucking scary. I think it got to a point when I was on the urgent list in hospital, and I was so comfortable on a dopamine drip in hospital waiting for my heart that I literally felt like I would be happy to live in hospital for the rest of my life and just be on a dopamine drip. And obviously that is not great. Yeah. But it's that scared of the future and having a transplant but being comfortable in a comfort zone. I think that's the thing a lot of people with health conditions have. They get really ill, but they get to a comfort zone where they know how to almost feel normal in an ill state. So they don't almost want to go forward because, yeah, you
don't know what if good is even possible anymore. So you just accept the best you have at the moment.
Yeah, and the idea of having a transplant was way more awful than the idea of sitting in a hospital bed and having the company of nurses all day. Really?
I mean, you seem like a good person, but almost like an ironic thing where like you're hoping someone dies so they can like give you their heart, you know?
Yeah, that was another head fuck as well.
You're like,
I remember going to a counselling session, and this is one of the reasons why I'm a coach and mentor now. But I went to this counselling session with this random counsellor who knew nothing really about health conditions. And I said to her, I was like, so I'm waiting for this heart, and I know there's someone probably walking around right now completely oblivious that they're going to die and I'm going to have their heart. Mm-hmm. And she just looked at me like, I don't know what to say to that. And yeah, it's just guess that lack of understanding from the counsellor's behalf. But yeah, it's a head fuck. Even now it's a head fuck. Sometimes I like almost go inward and I go, wait, someone else's heart is like plumbed into me. Mm-hmm. Like, how does that even work? It's plumbing. A lot of surgeons and nurses are like, oh, it's very simple. It's just plumbing, really.
Yeah.
But still, it's crazy,
complicated. It's weird. Yeah. Like, do you feel like a different person almost?
I mean, I've got more energy. More energy. I don't know if I feel like a different person. I feel like being so ill for so many years led me to being a better person. I don't know if I would have wanted to be that person be a version of myself that was not ill. I feel like I'd probably be a lot more like naive and just unaware of the world, and like I don't know if I wouldn't have known, would I? But I feel like I'm very understanding and caring, and
you're empathetic.
Yeah, empathetic person, and I don't know if I would have been that if I hadn't gone through all this shit.
Yeah. Well, I want to let everyone know Eliza did not have a smooth journey getting to a heart transplant. She actually had 3 false alarms. So what was going through your mind when it happened 3 times? That's a lot of fucking times.
Yeah. So the first time, all I had in my mind was I'm hungry, because you're nil by mouth. And I think it was like 3/4 of a day had gone and I hadn't eaten. So by the time they'd said at like 10 o'clock at night, it's not happening, I was just thankful that I could get a Chinese takeaway from the hospital. That is literally...
It's so weird you could eat Chinese food out of all foods in the world.
It honestly was one of the only things I could eat when I couldn't eat anything else.
It's so weird though, because it had like spices and it's like...
Oh, I don't really go for the spicy stuff. I go for like chicken chow mein. That's like my... That's my go-to, which isn't very interesting at all. So that was the first thing going through my mind. And I think a relief, because I don't feel like I was really psychologically ready for that first call. And actually going in the ambulance, being blue lighted up from Cornwall to Cambridge, which is like 300 plus miles. There was so much adrenaline, and
yeah.
I was in the ambulance and I had my phone and I was thinking, who do I need to message in case I die? Like, who do I need to tell? It was really surreal. I called it the ambulance box of reflection.
Okay.
So yeah, that was the first one. Second one, I was really not well. It turns out I actually had pneumonia when they were testing me before.
Oh no.
So yeah, I'm glad I didn't have that one, because otherwise I'd been transplanted with pneumonia. And then a week after, I was taken to another hospital and was in a hospital for like 3 weeks with pneumonia. So that one I was happy not to have. And then the third one, I was already on the urgent list in hospital. So they took me to intensive care to start prepping me. And then like we got a call from my surgeon basically saying it's not good enough. She's not going in. So that was quite disappointing, as I'd been in hospital for about 3 weeks at that point.
Yeah.
And then the fourth one was obviously the one that actually happened.
Do you even believe that like the fourth one was gonna happen at this point, or are you just like, I'm just gonna go home tonight?
So I think by the fourth one, I felt really peaceful. All my family were there. Like my mum and my brother had just got to the hospital just before I was going off.
I wouldn't even visit you anymore. I would just be like, did it not work? You know, I would just be like, I'll see you at the fifth one, you know?
I think by the second, I was like, I'm not going to expect this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I just almost had in my head, this is a false alarm. This is just a practice. And it's only when I go through those double doors with the red line on that I know that this is going to happen. And even when you go in for surgery and go under, like it still potentially won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just felt peaceful. I felt like very calm because it had already happened like 3 times. I'd almost got all that adrenaline out.
Yeah.
And I was just like chill. I was like, whatever, like come get me. But when I went through those double doors, that's when I like this emotion came over me, and I was like, oh fuck, like I'm either coming out of this fucking place dead or alive. Yeah, basically.
No, I mean, it's kind of weird in the chronic ill community where like you reach a point where like it's maximum and then you kind of like go into this deep calm state. It's a very weird feeling.
Yeah, it is a very weird feeling, and only a few of us know how that feels. But now I use that experience as like, if I find anything scary now, say if I'm doing speaking at a conference or I'm doing something that's out of my comfort zone, I'll go back to that feeling and being put on that operating table and going under and thinking, am I going to wake up? And then nothing's really too scary.
I don't know, maybe we're in the afterlife right now and God is just fucking you right now.
Yeah.
So I have here you were on a transplant list for only 3 months. So like 2 questions I have is how long can you live on a bad heart, and how were you able to get a heart so fast? 'Cause I feel like some people wait years for a new heart.
Yeah. So, do you know what? I think I was too scared to actually ask how long I had left. It obviously was not long, as I was waiting on the urgent list. So maybe a year. But after I had my transplant, my mum had said that when she picked my brother up from the train station for Christmas, like a month before, she had taken him to the pub and was like, she's not got long left.
Oh,
And that
no.
was really shocking to me, because I was still like thinking I was, surviving and going for it, but I really was not well at all. So yeah, I'd probably say under a year, and that's why I was put on the urgent list. What was the second question? Sorry.
Yeah. So, how were you able to get a heart so fast?
So I was waiting from the end of October. So then I was November, December, January. For 2 months I was on the normal waiting list. So that's just like you're kind of in a queue depending on your urgency.
Okay.
By mid-January I had got really, really ill. I was just getting worse. Like all my symptoms were just getting awful, really.
Yeah.
So we went to the transplant hospital for an appointment. I just thought it was going to be another appointment, go home, just wait it out. And
so what is this appointment? Let's talk about the appointment. Like what that entails.
So the appointment was basically I thought it was a regular appointment with one of the main transplant consultants. And he basically said, you're really ill. You can go home and wait, or you can stay and wait in hospital till you receive your heart transplant. And so my brother and my dad were with me in that room, and I just felt so bad for my parents and my family for like having this like sense of like having to look after me when I was so ill. So I basically checked myself in for my family, and I knew like if I was on the urgent list, so I was getting checked in on the urgent list on a dopamine drip, that would enhance my chances of getting a transplant quicker. And they said when I was in the hospital waiting, they said it would be about an 8-week wait, because I'm O negative, and O negative blood group is universal. So anyone can take an O negative heart, but I can't take any other blood group heart. And my height, I'm quite tall. I'm 5'10", and there's not as many tall people as small people. So you need to get a heart that's big enough to fit the hole that is, going to be left.
So you're saying you have a big heart?
Yeah, I've got a male heart.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've got a male heart. I'm trying to work out if I'm part of the LGBTQ XYZ because I know there's something male in me. I've chatted to a few people about that. Sorry?
That's what she said.
But that often shocks people when I tell them I have a male heart. I guess it's the same. It's the same heart, just different gender.
I guess you're bisexual now?
Maybe. I don't know. I'll have to work that one out.
I don't know.
Maybe I should create like a new thing.
Yeah, or binary maybe too. You can add that to your list.
I don't know. I have chatted to some of my friends who are in that group, and they're like, "No, Liza, you can't do that." I'm like, okay.
I don't know.
Don't want to offend anyone.
It's a very unique situation. I don't think they have like a book on that.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's covered that one yet. Maybe I should make a thing.
There you go. You gotta put it out into the world. So you get a new heart. You get a huge source of energy. You say in an article that you had trouble walking. Was it because of the blood flowing differently, or you were just not used to the energy, or you were just so tired that you lost all muscle mass and such?
Do you mean walking after transplant?
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously I'd lost so much muscle, moving and walking, I'd like almost lost that ability to do it properly. So when I was in intensive care for 5 days. I had the physio that it was got to the point where I was in bed, and it was like the tiniest movements to get off the bed, and then for them to hold me up, and then for me to like almost stamp my feet, and then like even just sitting in a chair was like a major operation on those first few days, because your sternum's cut open, put back together again. You're in so much pain. Yeah, it's not fun at all. I remember that first time I walked without any help to the loo, and it was like, oh my god, it's a miracle. Slowly but quickly, you build your confidence to walk again. But I remember like walking for the first time, like a proper kind of stride. And I remember like my body automatically wanting to like stop because I was anticipating my heart to like do to palpitate. Is that right word? Palpitate.
I'm not sure. I'm kind of going along with your story.
Let me say that again. So yeah, it got to the point where I was, striding, and I was expecting my heart to do funny flutters and have some palpitations. And so my body, I wanted to stop. My brain was saying, stop. But, nothing was happening because I had this new heart. But it's just so interesting, how even though you've had a heart transplant, it doesn't mean you've had a brain transplant. So your body's still like doing all the things you were doing before. Yeah, it's really interesting. You've got to do a lot of brain work as well when you have a transplant. It's not just, right, heart, go off for a run.
So you're saying that before the transplant, like your heart would kind of like beat out of rhythm, I guess, and you would kind of feel in your heart that you have to stop.
Yeah.
And then like now after the transplant, like your heart can take almost anything now, and your brain is like, no, wait, stop. You gotta
stop. Yeah. So I have a lung condition as well. So sometimes my lungs hold me back a bit. So I've done running, I've done horse riding, I've done sea swimming, normal pool swimming, like walking up mountains. I can do all of that, but I'm still quite cautious because of my lungs and getting like puffed out. Whereas maybe someone who's completely fit except for their heart is going to be doing like marathons and stuff, but that's not for me. Sorry, I go on a tangent and then I completely forget what I'm saying.
So we're gonna throw some facts about Eliza's life expectancy. I mean, Eliza really doesn't know how long her heart will last, but I have here 80 to 90, and every 100 people will live at least a year. 70 to 75 people, and every 100 people will live at least 5 years, and 50 and every 100 people will live at least 10 years. So you got a new heart. Everything is going well. I want to talk about your recovery. With that in mind, I think it'd be a great way to talk about your first wilderness camping trip to Scotland and 2020, since it was a huge turning point with your new heart. And second coming of Eliza, I have here you had like big eureka moments, finding a new meaning, relearning your identity, and testing your capabilities. So let's expand on that. So like, do you feel like you're a new Eliza? Like, did you feel like a rebirth of yourself?
Yeah, I guess it's that energy that's given me that opportunity to be my true self. Obviously, without the transplant, I wouldn't be doing the transplant coaching and mentoring and counselling, but it has given me that opportunity to, go hike up a mountain when I probably shouldn't have, but I did. But, that's the whole point. Like, having a transplant, you can be a bit reckless. Of course, you've got to take your medications and put your sunscreen on and do all these things, but the whole point of having a transplant is to live life. And what's the point in wrapping yourself up in cotton wool post-transplant? There was this one thing that my transplant surgeon said to me when I left hospital, and he said the people that live the longest are the ones who just go for it and go for life and just do everything they want to do, and they're not scared. And I've kept that with me. I think it's not just about body, it's also mind. And if you think you're going to die in 5 years' time, you probably are going to die in 5 years' time. If you think you're going to live for 30 years and you're like going for it and living your life, and you're more likely then to do that. I mean, there's no I don't have any science behind this, but like a lot of it is mindset and keeping yourself healthy, like sleeping well, eating well, like just almost allowing your body to be at its optimum level. Like obviously, we can't change that we have a transplanted heart, and it could have rejection, or it might not last for 30 years, but we can still, you know, do those things like everyone else, like eat well, like I said, eat well, sleep well, not get skin cancer because we don't have a sunscreen on. It's just common sense, isn't it, really?
Yeah. I mean, I think the big thing, I think, is like when you're out more going, you're exercising your heart, where if you're just sitting inside all the time, you're kind of just wasting your heart. And you want, like,
Yeah.
you want to keep
So you
moving.
need to exercise it. You need to
Yeah.
push it out its comfort zone. It's like a good, healthy heart. And why restrict it when you've been given this gift and your donor has given you this gift of life? Yeah, it'd almost be like, it'd be really sad not to kind of use it and get the most out of it. But then, you know, not everyone who has a transplant wants to do exercise or do this or that. So
Yeah.
you can't really force everyone into it.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own fair share of like to be on bed rest and like just away from like life for a long time, for 5 years for me. And I always like curious for myself, and like feel like I'm a totally different person coming out of it, coming out of like being healthy again and such. So like, but I always wonder if like, let's say I didn't have the help, would I be like the same person? Like, you know, like let's say like confidence wise, you know, like outgoing, adventurous, like it is like the new me that's emerged here, or would that have been the old me anyway? Either, like, what do you think? Do you think like you're a new Eliza, or do you think you're just like a continuation with like a commercial break in between?
I guess, you know, without transplant, I wouldn't have become Transplant Chats to Eliza. And I guess that is partly my purpose. You know, I try not to create all my purpose around transplant, because that's only one part of my life. But I wouldn't have created this amazing resource that's helping so many people if it wasn't for what I'd been through. So I almost feel like what I've been through was for a reason, and that's created my purpose.
I mean, I would definitely not be talking to you if you were just a regular Eliza. You know?
Yeah, there'd be no reason.
Boring Eliza.
Just normal Eliza.
So do you have any limits now then, or are you just kind of free to do whatever you want since you kind of tested your limits, I guess?
I guess there's no real limit. I guess live and fermented food's the limit. What else is the limit? The sea when there's raw sewage in it. I'm not sure what diving's like. I think there might be something around diving, but I'm not 100% sure. To be honest, when I go to the transplant hospital and I speak to my doctors, I go, can I do this? They'll be like, yeah, sure, go for it. Can I do that? Yeah, sure, go for it. Like, they're so chill. They literally just want us to live our lives.
Maybe it's the you problem that you're thinking there's a barrier, but maybe there's just no barrier at all. It's just more like,
I don't think there is a barrier. I think it's just thinking either I can't do it or everything's figure outable. How do I do it? What are the options? What can I break down, or how can I make this work? Because everything can work depending on how much money you have. But yeah, there is no limit. Like, I live with my parents. I have my own business, which is freelance. Like, if I wanted, I could go to Bali next week. Like, there's nothing stopping me. But I do quite like living in my little town and like, you know, having my family as company, and I quite enjoy it. But maybe down the line I'll be like, right, I'm gonna go to Bali. Nothing's stopping me. But I think that is a thing post-transplant, is confidence. You know, remembering all your medications, feeling like you're in a place where you know there's transplant support if you needed it. I think that is maybe one thing. Like, maybe sub-Sahara of Africa might not be the greatest place if you're a transplant patient, if you get, you know, if there's no hospital in a couple of hours. But, you know, some people who've had a transplant may be completely happy with that. It's everyone's comfort zones are different, isn't it? I would personally not go to a place like that if there was no hospital nearby. I think that's probably my limit, is if there's a hospital or not. And if the food is like safe. So like, I think the transplant team say like places like Asia can be a bit dodgy but then I guess you can just buy packaged food and it's more like
McDonald's.
street food and stuff.
So let's talk about the recipient's family. So you mentioned it earlier that like you can't say when you got the transplant because the family's mourning and you don't want to like put yourself in their face like, hey, I have the heart. So is there like a timetable that you should wait? Have you ever contacted the family yet, or are you still waiting?
Yeah, so I encourage anyone who has received an organ to say thanks to their donor. I think it was about a year post I wrote a letter to my donor family, and my donor was called Tom, and his wife was called Lisa, and she was the person who wrote back to me, and they had a dog and 2 boys, and she basically just told me about him, about his love for life and people, and that's why they decided to donate his organs. And I wrote a letter back after that, but I haven't received anything back. So I think I want to again, but it's quite like a slow process in the UK. It goes through quite a few different hospital and then transplant hub and whatnot. But yeah, I'm so grateful to my donor, and if his family hadn't said yes, I don't know how long I'd have been waiting, or if I'd actually ever received a heart, or if I'd survived long enough to receive one. It's just pretty crazy getting your head around someone else's heart being inside you. And I like to say like it's a borrowed heart, like I'm borrowing it from Tom. I just like a donor heart. Like it's all very quite like clinical. Well, not clinical, but it's just hard to get your head around, really.
Yeah.
So I like borrowed heart. It's like it's still his, but I'm like using it and keeping it going.
Can I borrow your heart sometimes?
Ah, is that a chat line?
Okay, so before I take the mic away from you, is there anything you want to say, promote any words of wisdom? The mic is all yours.
Oh my god, you put me on the spot.
Yep.
Bloody hell, Joe. I guess. Can I just have a minute to like think about it?
Yeah, of course. Take your time. While you're thinking, I'll talk a little bit. So Eliza said that like the family had to decide on to give the heart away, and Eliza emphasized in her articles and stuff to like personally have the option to donate yourself after you died because like I think the best thing is your body is gone, like you can't do anything about it, but if there's a chance to help someone like Eliza, for example, like you should do it because they'll let your body just go to waste. Like most people have normal heart and lungs and eyes, and I don't know what else you can donate at this point, but if there's an option to do it, just do it. Like you could be helping someone live, a year, 5 years, 10 years, like help other people, especially if you'll like almost live longer. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, I completely second that. If you haven't already had that conversation with your family about if you want to donate your organs or not, wherever you are in the world, you can still have that conversation. So, if it ever got to a point where you did pass away unexpectedly and organ donation nurse asked your family if you want to donate, then that makes their decision easier and less painful because they know that's what you wanted. But final words, I suppose something that I've learned from all this transplant pre and post stuff is to not plan too far ahead. No one's invincible. If I were you, think, if I were to die in 3 months' time, am I happy with where I am now? And if you're not, make a change. That's what I do. I didn't know how long I had left. And so when I was pre-transplant, I just tried to make the most out of it as possible, even when I was dying, like going to Beyonce concerts and road trips through France and Spain, with awful heart failure. And post-transplant, I still don't know how long I've got. Rejection could come at any point. And so my way of, being in control of that is 3 months, am I happy with where I am? If I'm not, change it. Like, what is your passion? What is your dream? Do it now. Don't wait till you're 30 or 40 or 50 or when you're retired. Like, you might never retire, you might die, basically. And that's really hard to listen to, but you just don't know when your time comes and you want to leave this world, you know, having done everything you've done and be remembered by something. What do you want to be remembered by?
Well, please live another 3 months so you can see my episode go live so you can share it with everybody. And then you're free to do whatever you like. Okay.
Okay, great. I'll take that.
Okay. Thank you, Eliza, so much for giving me your time. If you want to follow Eliza, her name is under her face right now and in the description below. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching, and I'll see everyone next time. Bye.
Bye.